Stop spending thousands on energy drinks and tea boosters to fix a problem that isn't a deficiency. It's a leak. You are currently paying a hustle tax that is bankrupting your biology, eroding your muscle mass, and wrecking your sleep while you sleepwalk through your prime years. I'm going to show you the one silent killer that is dismantling your masculinity from the inside out, and exactly how to flip the switch to stop the damage for free. I'm Dr. Christine Rodriguez, and this is Men's Vitality Hub. This channel exists to give men like you authentic, valid knowledge about your health, so you can make real, informed decisions that genuinely change how you feel and how you perform. Not trends, not fear, real biology, real solutions. That is what we are here for. Let's go deep. Here is exactly what this video is going to give you. Stay for every section because each one builds on the last. First, I am going to explain what chronic stress actually does inside the male body at the hormonal and cellular level, the real mechanisms. Then, I am going to walk you through the specific documented effects on testosterone, energy, muscle, and mental performance. Then, I am going to be completely honest about the long-term side effects that accumulate when stress goes unmanaged for months and years. Then, I am going to show you exactly how to prevent and reverse those side effects. Then, I am going to tell you which men face the most severe hormonal consequences from chronic stress and need to act with the greatest urgency. And finally, the complete, practical, step-by-step fixes that work with your biology to restore vitality that stress has been draining. Every section matters. Let's start with the biology. When your brain perceives a threat, and I want to be very clear that the brain cannot distinguish between a physical predator and a threatening email from your boss, a frightening financial statement, a difficult relationship, or a never-ending stream of urgent notifications. It triggers a cascade that begins in a tiny, almond-shaped region of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala fires a distress signal to the hypothalamus, the command center of the body's stress response. The hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system, which signals the adrenal glands, small triangular organs sitting on top of your kidneys, to release a surge of stress hormones. First adrenaline within seconds, then cortisol within minutes. Heart rate accelerates, blood pressure rises, glucose floods the bloodstream, and every non-essential biological function, digestion, immune response, repair processes, and yes, testosterone production, is temporarily suppressed. This is the stress response as evolution designed it. Brilliant, powerful, perfectly calibrated for a world where threats were acute, physical, and short-lived. The predator passes, cortisol drops, everything resumes. The system was never designed for what modern life has done to it. Because the threats men face today are not acute and short-lived, they are chronic and relentless. The mortgage that does not resolve. The job pressure that follows you home on your phone at 10 p.m. The relationship tension that simmers for weeks without resolution. The financial anxiety that wakes you at 3 a.m. The back-to-back obligations that leave no margin for recovery. The amygdala fires the same distress signal for all of it. The adrenal glands produce the same cortisol response. And when that response is triggered dozens of times per day, every single day, the body never receives the signal that the threat has passed. Cortisol never fully drops. The stress response never fully resolves. And the biological consequences of that sustained cortisol elevation are severe, systematic, and compounding. Let me show you exactly what chronically elevated cortisol does to the male hormonal system, because this is where stress stops being abstract and becomes deeply personal. The first and most direct mechanism is the pregnenolone steal. Cortisol and testosterone are both steroid hormones, and they are both produced from the same precursor molecule, pregnenolone. Think of pregnenolone as a limited raw material that the body allocates between cortisol production and testosterone production based on what it perceives as the body's current priority. When the stress response is chronically activated and the adrenal glands are in constant demand for cortisol, they consume a disproportionate share of the available pregnenolone, leaving significantly less for testosterone synthesis. This is not a subtle effect. It is a direct, measurable diversion of hormonal raw materials away from testosterone and toward cortisol, occurring every single day that chronic stress persists. The second mechanism is HPT axis suppression. The hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis is the hormonal communication chain that governs testosterone production. Cortisol directly inhibits this axis at multiple points. It suppresses gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, which reduces the pituitary's output of luteinizing hormone, which means the Leydig cells in the testes receive a weaker signal to produce testosterone. The entire production chain is throttled simultaneously at multiple levels. A man under chronic stress is not just dealing with the discomfort of feeling stressed. He is operating with a hormonally suppressed system that is biologically incapable of producing testosterone at its natural potential, regardless of what he eats, how he trains, or what supplements he takes. The third mechanism is sleep destruction. Cortisol operates on a natural diurnal rhythm, high in the morning to support waking energy, falling through the day, and reaching its lowest point in the evening to allow the nervous system to wind down and the body to enter deep, restorative sleep. Chronic stress disrupts this rhythm profoundly. Cortisol remains elevated in the evening when it should be falling. Deep sleep stages, where the majority of daily testosterone is manufactured through LH pulse-driven Leydig cell activation, are fragmented or compressed. The overnight testosterone production window is compromised, and the man wakes up already behind on his hormonal recovery, starting the next day's stress with yesterday's testosterone debt unpaid. Now let's talk about the specific documented effects on male vitality, the ways chronic stress shows up in real life, in the body and mind of men like you. The first effect is body composition destruction. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It breaks down tissue to release energy. Acutely, this is useful. Chronically, it is devastating. Muscle tissue is preferentially broken down, reducing lean mass, strength, and the metabolic rate that muscle supports. Simultaneously, cortisol promotes visceral fat storage, the dangerous abdominal fat that accumulates around the organs and drives its own hormonal disruption. Visceral fat is rich in aromatase, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. As chronic stress drives visceral fat accumulation, aromatase activity increases, testosterone is converted away at an accelerating rate, and estrogen activity rises. The man gains belly fat, loses muscle, and his hormonal environment shifts progressively toward estrogen dominance, all driven by the cortisol that chronic stress continuously pumps through his system. The second effect is cognitive decline and emotional dysregulation. The prefrontal cortex, governing rational thinking, long-term planning, impulse control, and nuanced decision-making, is exquisitely sensitive to cortisol. Research published in Biological Psychiatry documented that chronic stress exposure produces measurable reductions in prefrontal gray matter volume. The mental sharpness that once came naturally begins to erode. The ability to think clearly under pressure, to make good decisions, to stay focused through complexity gradually diminishes. Simultaneously, the amygdala becomes hyperactivated, making men more emotionally reactive, more irritable, more prone to the short-fused responses that damage relationships and compound stress further. The third effect is cardiovascular deterioration. Chronically elevated cortisol raises blood pressure, promotes arterial inflammation, disrupts healthy cholesterol metabolism, and drives the insulin resistance that compounds cardiovascular risk over time. Research has documented significantly higher cardiovascular mortality rates in men with chronically elevated cortisol compared to men with well-regulated stress hormone levels. The heart is paying a price for chronic stress that most men never connect to the pressure they are carrying. The fourth effect is immune suppression. While acute cortisol activates certain immune responses, chronic cortisol elevation suppresses the immune system broadly, reducing the body's ability to fight infection, manage inflammation, and conduct the cellular repair processes that maintain long-term health. Men under chronic stress get sick more frequently, recover more slowly, and show elevated inflammatory markers that directly suppress testosterone production by interfering with HPT axis function. Now, let's be honest about the long-term side effects when chronic stress goes unmanaged. The compounding damage that accumulates over months and years of sustained cortisol elevation. The first long-term side effect is accelerated hormonal aging. Chronic stress compresses the natural, gradual decline of testosterone into a faster trajectory. Men whose stress is unmanaged show testosterone levels and biological markers more consistent with men significantly older than their chronological age. The hormonal aging that stress accelerates is not reversible on a one-to-one basis. Some of that acceleration represents permanent reduction in Leydig cell reserve that cannot be fully restored by stress management alone. The second long-term side effect is metabolic disease. The insulin resistance driven by chronic cortisol elevation, combined with the visceral fat accumulation that cortisol promotes, creates the metabolic environment in which type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and their cardiovascular complications develop. Research has documented a direct dose-response relationship between chronic stress exposure and metabolic disease risk across large population studies. The third long-term side effect is neurological damage. Chronic cortisol elevation causes dendritic retraction, the shrinkage of the neural connections in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus that support memory, learning, and executive function. Research has documented that men with histories of chronic severe stress show measurable hippocampal volume reduction, a structural change associated with increased risk of depression, anxiety disorders, and cognitive decline. This is not metaphorical. Chronic stress physically changes the brain in ways that affect how men think, feel, and function for years after the acute stress period has ended. Now, how do you prevent and reverse these side effects? Because the body responds to the right inputs with remarkable capacity for restoration. The first and most foundational prevention strategy is deliberate physiological downregulation. The intentional daily activation of the parasympathetic nervous system to directly counteract the sympathetic dominance of chronic stress. The most evidence-backed method for this is controlled breathing with an extended exhale. Research has documented that deliberately extending the exhale to approximately twice the length of the inhale, inhaling for 4 counts, exhaling for 8, directly activates the vagus nerve, which is the primary pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system. Cortisol drops measurably. Heart rate variability improves. The nervous system shifts from fight or flight toward rest and repair. 5 minutes of this breathing practice, done deliberately, consistently, at the moments of highest stress, produces acute cortisol reduction and cumulative nervous system recalibration that compounds over weeks of consistent practice. The second prevention strategy is optimizing the exercise prescription for stress management. Exercise is one of the most powerful stress modulators available, but the type, intensity, and duration of exercise matters enormously for cortisol management. Moderate intensity resistance training, 3 to 5 sessions per week, 45 to 60 minutes per session, produces acute cortisol spikes during training, followed by significant cortisol reduction in the recovery hours, and recalibrates baseline cortisol downward over time. High-volume endurance training, or excessive daily training without adequate recovery, adds biological stress to psychological stress and can worsen cortisol burden rather than relieving it. The prescription for men under chronic stress is deliberate, moderate training with adequate rest, not punishment through excessive exercise. The third prevention strategy is nutritional adrenal support. The adrenal glands have dramatically elevated nutrient demands during periods of chronic stress, demands that the average diet does not meet. Vitamin C is the most concentrated nutrient in the adrenal glands and is consumed at an accelerated rate during cortisol production. Magnesium, deficient in over 50% of men, is essential for HPA axis regulation and cortisol modulation. Supplementing with 300 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate in the evening reduces nighttime cortisol and improves sleep quality measurably. B vitamins, particularly B5, pantothenic acid, are critical cofactors in adrenal hormone production and are rapidly depleted under chronic stress. Addressing these nutritional deficiencies does not eliminate stress, but it gives the adrenal system the raw materials to manage the stress response more efficiently and recover more completely between stress events. The fourth prevention strategy is sleep protection, treating sleep not as a passive outcome of stress reduction, but as an active, non-negotiable intervention. For men under chronic stress, sleep is emergency hormonal medicine. It is the only window in which cortisol can reach its natural overnight nadir, in which testosterone can be manufactured through undisturbed LH pulsing, and in which the adrenal system can rest and restore its capacity for the following day. A consistent pre-sleep routine that actively downregulates the nervous system, no work stimulation after 8 p.m., screens off by 9 p.m., extended exhale breathing before bed, a cool, dark sleep environment, is not a wellness suggestion for men under chronic stress. It is the most direct hormonal intervention available to them. The fifth prevention strategy addresses the dimension of stress management that most health content ignores entirely: the role of meaning, connection, and psychological restoration in cortisol regulation. Research in psychoneuroendocrinology has documented that meaningful social connection, a clear sense of purpose, and regular experiences of mastery and accomplishment are among the most potent regulators of the chronic stress response. Oxytocin, the neurochemical produced during positive social connection and emotional intimacy, directly suppresses cortisol and supports the hormonal conditions for testosterone recovery. Men who invest in their relationships, who engage in work that feels meaningful, who build regular experiences of accomplishment into their lives, those men have hormonal profiles that reflect those experiences in measurable ways. This is not soft advice. It is biology. Now, which men face the most severe hormonal consequences from chronic stress and need to act with the greatest urgency? Men who are simultaneously dealing with low testosterone and high chronic stress face a compounding hormonal crisis. The pregnenolone steal and HPT axis suppression of chronic stress are acting on a testosterone baseline that is already reduced, potentially pushing levels low enough to produce significant clinical symptoms and long-term health consequences. For these men, stress management is not optional lifestyle advice. It is urgent hormonal medicine. Men in high-pressure professions, executives, entrepreneurs, emergency responders, healthcare workers, financial professionals, who operate in sustained, high-demand environments without adequate recovery protocols, face the long-term neurological and cardiovascular consequences of chronic cortisol elevation that accumulates silently over careers measured in decades. Men going through major life transitions, divorce, job loss, bereavement, financial crisis, experience acute on chronic stress loading that can produce dramatic short-term testosterone suppression and long-term hormonal disruption if the stress response is not actively managed during and after the transition period. Men with pre-existing metabolic conditions, insulin resistance, elevated triglycerides, hypertension, are already operating in a biological environment that chronic stress worsens directly, and the urgency of implementing stress management strategies is proportional to the severity of their existing metabolic dysfunction. Now, the complete step-by-step fix protocol. This is your practical roadmap for reversing what chronic stress has done to your vitality. Step 1. Implement the 5-minute extended exhale breathing practice immediately. Set a reminder on your phone for 3 times per day: morning, midday, and before bed. 4 counts in, 8 counts out, for 5 minutes. This is the minimum effective dose for acute cortisol reduction and the starting point for nervous system recalibration. Step 2. Restructure your exercise to the moderate resistance training prescription. 3 to 4 sessions per week, 45 to 60 minutes, compound movements, adequate rest between sessions. If you are currently overtraining, daily intense sessions without rest days, reduce volume immediately. More training under chronic stress does not produce better results. It produces more cortisol and less testosterone. Step 3. Supplement your adrenal system. Add magnesium glycinate, 300 to 400 milligrams, every evening. Add a quality B complex supplement every morning. Increase your dietary vitamin C through whole food sources, bell peppers, citrus, strawberries, or through a supplement of 500 to 1,000 milligrams daily. These are the nutritional inputs your adrenal glands are consuming faster than your diet is likely replacing. Step 4. Build and protect your sleep protocol as a non-negotiable daily practice. Consistent bedtime, consistent wake time, no work stimulation after 8 p.m., 5 minutes of extended exhale breathing before sleep, cool, dark sleep environment. This is your daily hormonal recovery window. Protect it with the same priority you protect your most important professional commitments. Step 5. Invest deliberately in the relationships and activities that produce oxytocin and restore psychological energy. Schedule time with people who matter. Engage in activities that produce genuine satisfaction and a sense of mastery. These are not luxuries to be pursued when stress subsides. They are biological inputs that directly regulate your cortisol and support your testosterone recovery. And they must be protected, not sacrificed, during the periods of highest stress. Step 6. Track your progress at 4 and 8 weeks. Pay attention to your afternoon energy levels, your sleep depth and morning freshness, your emotional resilience, your body composition, and your morning drive. These are the real-world hormonal markers of cortisol reduction and testosterone recovery. For objective data, a cortisol and testosterone blood panel before and after 8 weeks of consistent stress management implementation will show you in measurable terms what the biology is doing in response to your efforts. Stress is not a sign of strength. Managing it is the most powerful performance decision a man can make. The man who manages his stress, who breathes deliberately, trains intelligently, nourishes his adrenal system, protects his sleep, and invests in the relationships and meaning that restore him, that man does not just feel better, he performs better. He leads better. His testosterone reflects a body being treated with intelligence, and intention. And that intelligence shows up in every dimension of his life, every single day. Your vitality is not a casualty of a busy life. It is the foundation that makes everything in your life possible. Protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. If this video gave you a new and complete understanding of what chronic stress is doing to your hormonal health, if you are going to implement even one of these fixes starting today, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to Men's Vitality Hub. Every week, this is what we bring you: real science, honest guidance, practical protocols for men who are serious about living at their best. And tell me in the comments, what is the biggest source of chronic stress in your life right now? Work? Sleep? Finances? Relationships? Drop it honestly below, because naming it is the first step to managing it. And your answer might help another man in this community realize he is not alone in what he is carrying. Thank you for watching. Breathe out longer than you breathe in. I will see you in the next one.